Sporting Wales podcast.
Supported by DragonBet.
Your go-to for Welsh sports news and views.
On today's Sporting Wales podcast, we are very lucky enough to have the amazing Ross Harries and Dan Biggar. Obviously, Ross Harries writing Dan Biggar's book, which is, I've seen it everywhere. Fair play, boys. But lads, welcome. And how are you both?
Thanks, Cuff. Very good, mate. If you'd have said to me 6 years ago I'd have been doing this with you, I'm not quite sure I'd have believed
6 years ago?
No, I'm good, mate. I'm good. We've had a busy couple of weeks with the book, and it's been going all right. All good here. And Ross has probably picked up the flack in Wales in terms of being asked about it a bit more. I've managed to just get in and out, and Ross has managed to probably have to deal with all the questions in Wales.
Well, hopefully we'll find out a bit more about it from yourself. I think later on, I was chatting to Ross earlier on, I've been listening to it in the car, and it has been, I've done 8 hours so far. I said, I've had enough of Biggs' voice. I thought I had enough of you screaming at me on the field, but...
You told me you found it quite seductive.
Oh, I'm not sure about that, but yeah, it's fair play. It's good so far. Ross, how are you, mate? How's things?
I'm very well, thanks. First time I think I've ever been introduced as the amazing Ross Harris. So
well, I was going to go
take that all
the
day
amazing, good-looking, charismatic, and then go you, and then Dan, but I couldn't say that. But
thanks for resisting that. Yeah, all good. I've brought some merch along, which is strategically placed, because Dan and I haven't really publicised it enough yet, Dan. 2 solid weeks on the road wasn't quite enough. So any opportunity, so thanks for letting us come on. Appreciate it.
No worries. How was the tour? How was that tour? The 2-week tour with Dan Biggar? Was it harder to tour with him, or was it?
No, it was really good. I think people think, because they've seen all the pictures, that Dan and I basically travelled around in a transit van for 2 weeks, sleeping on a mattress and essentially going out drinking every night. It wasn't quite like that, because Dan had to get permission from Toulon to fly back and forth. So it was bit of a smash and grab, but we had some great nights, didn't we? We did sort of evening events in theatres, and sometimes, especially on a windswept weeknight, and you're driving up somewhere like Wrexham, not necessarily rugby country, and you do start to wonder on the way there, is anyone going to turn up on a sort of rainy Tuesday night? But fair play to the promoters, and obviously to Dan's pulling power. They sold out virtually every venue, so every night we were kind of opening the curtain and wondering if there might be 3 men and a dog out there. And every night it was kind of a rapt audience all clutching a copy of the book. Because that was a crucial thing, Dan, wasn't it? We did these events whereby to get in, you had to buy a copy of the book. So guaranteed sales.
Well, happy days. How did you find it, Biggs?
Yeah, it was good, Cuff, because, I mean, by the last afternoon, evening, it was kind of like the same story as Ross, wasn't it? In terms of, for us, anyway.
Fresh audience, though. So
it was great for the new audiences, but for us, it was kind of like, by the end, we kind of knew, as soon as Ross said or asked one question, we knew that the next question was going to lead into that, etc., etc. So we had it well versed by the end, but it was good. It was really good. It was busy. It was, tough going, but really enjoyable getting to meet so many people, get out and when you see it, I think actually in bookshops and people sort of buying it makes it all worthwhile a little bit, yeah.
I bet. What was one of your favourite parts of the tour then, in terms of like favourite place, or was there experience, people there? Like what was it like?
What I found interesting, we said this at the time, Dan, didn't we? You used to doing events like that at sort of corporate dinners and stuff where you're competing with the sound of clanking cutlery and people getting steadily drunk, and you kind of got to win over the room. But the literary crowd is very different to the average rugby crowd, and it was almost like there was this reverent silence wherever we went, and it almost took a while to warm some audiences up, didn't it, Dan? Like you had to crack a few gags just to get a bit of life in the room. But in terms of like favourite places, we had a really good night in Penarth, I think, didn't we? The Paget Rooms in Penarth, lovely old building, really well maintained. And, Dan's sister was there, father-in-law, my wife and kids came along. Just ate Haribo throughout most of it and didn't pay any attention.
You make them all buy a book? Do they all have to buy a book?
Yeah, they all had to buy a book with their pocket money, raided their piggy banks.
There's no friends or family.
There's no freebies on Biggs' side, I know that.
But I did say to my eldest Izzy afterwards, she's 10, I said to her, did you enjoy it? And she went, I didn't really listen, to be honest. I was just reading my book. But I did hear the swear words. So clearly we should have censored our output according to the audience, because there were some youngsters there.
Well, it builds up to the story, doesn't it?
the pageant rooms in Penarth was really good because Ross, I hadn't heard this one before, but Ross made a really good gag, and he said you always play the pageant rooms twice in your career, once on the way up and once on the way down. And Ross sort of said, "Oh, it's great to be back," sort of thing. So for me, I would have been quite happy if I paid the money and just heard that gag and left type of thing. So it got me off to a good start anyway. But no, it was. Penarth was really good. I had some friends and family come out as well. For me, we did Waterstones in Swansea, and for me that was a bit surreal for me because I used to be, when I was a 7-8-year-old or whatever, my mum used to take me into Swansea for McDonald's, and then you pick out your favourite. Goosebumps was like the book back in the day when I was sort of going in. So I'd always go into Waterstones, get a book, and go from there. And the shop was pretty much the same as it was, 25 years ago. So for me, that was quite a cool experience going in there compared to a 7-8-year-old going in and picking your favourite book. So to do a book signing there was really cool. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. Like, when did you have the idea that you wanted to write a book, Biggs? Because I never, in camp and stuff, we always take the piss out of each other or the squad, but I never thought you'd literally just say it out loud in a book. Because, the amount of times we say, "Oh, imagine if we just write a book, we'd probably be arrested or something," wouldn't we? Just things like that.
I'm worried if Caroline Morgan, Kaz, writes a book. That's the time we need to be worried about if she writes a book, I'd say. No, I think Ross. Me and Ross chatted in South Africa in a coffee shop in Cape Town in 2022, and Ross just planted the idea and said, "Look, there's a bit of interest. Would you be keen?" And I suppose I didn't really know how to respond to that initially, but I think Ross sort of sold it to me on that the publishers are really keen, and people are really keen to hear about the Welsh 10 jersey, or that's kind of like a big pull. So for me, I kind of thought it's when I went away and the weeks and months after chatting to Ross, I kind of thought, well, it is quite a special jersey. It's quite an iconic jersey. So for someone like me who's worn the shirt quite a few times to have done a book would be quite a nice way to tell the story through that amongst, my childhood, the highs and lows of my career and different bits and pieces. So for me, it was kind of like nice that people wanted to do the book, which was the first thing, and there was a bit of interest, but it was nice to be able to tell my story through not being on social media for all my career, and it was nice to be able to give my opinion on certain scenarios, matches, people, etc.
Yeah, I agree. I think because you're not on social media, are you? And I think a lot of people don't really understand yourself or what you've achieved or what you've gone through to achieve. So it's quite a nice side that you can explain it straight away from your side of it, because a lot of people just have, what's like people in Wales, they seem to judge you straight away without even really meeting you, don't you? You're a competitive bloke. This is why you played 112 times to Wales in my eyes, and you've got a lot of good stories.
I think as well, you just see the 80 minutes on a Saturday, don't you? And you don't, and if that's all you're seeing, then that's all I suppose you can judge in a way. Do you know what I mean? But I think for me, it's kind of like I'd like to think I'm very different off the field to on the field, and yeah, like you said, Kat, there's probably a few stories we left out. There's probably a good few stories from camp. And
there's about 40,000 words on the cutting room floor.
40,000.
Yeah. Oh, we had to shave a fair bit off. Not all for reasons of censure. Some were just purely so we could fit the book on the shelf, because it was going to be quite a weighty tome by the end of it. But yeah, some stuff is genuinely sacred, isn't it? And that was part of Dan and I when we had our first conversation. Dan was pretty certain that he didn't want to, do a book just to make sensationalist headlines or slag people off.
Like Johnny Sexton.
Well, again, I've not read Johnny Sexton's, but I've seen the outcry. But you could argue, because Dan and I had a conversation about serialization, and there's always the risk that if you allow a newspaper to serialize the book, that they will take the most salacious bits and blow them up into headlines. That could be what's happened to Johnny Sexton's.
What story really sticks out with you within the book that that could just grab the people's imagination and go out and read it, sort of thing?
For me,
yeah, well, both, yeah.
Guys, there's quite a few. Like Dan said, often it's the stuff where we all know about the triumphs and the celebrations and the trophies won and stuff, but it's often finding out, what really goes through a pro sportsman's mind when, the chips are down. And there was one story, I remember sitting down with Dan talking about the 2013 Lions tour. and it sounds so unfair saying it out loud, but you guys beat England 33 in the final game of the Six Nations to win the title. And of the 15 players that took to the field, Dan was the only one who wasn't selected in the squad, which just, in retrospect, seems cruel, just to not pick the guy who kind of marshalled the back line for that entire game. And you know, I wondered whether that still rankled with Dan or whether it was ancient history. But, you know, Dan told me in real detail about the day that the squad was announced and the emotions he went through, and that was kind of fascinating for me as, you know, as a fan as much as a ghostwriter, to really try and understand how, when you kind of plumb those depths as a sports person, how do you process it and how do you bounce back and recover? And I suppose, Dan, that was an ongoing theme as well, wasn't it? You know, careers in terms of trajectory, they do go up and down, and you have to have the will and the spirit to fight back when things don't go quite right.
Yeah, I think that was generally the theme for me, Kev. You know, it's almost easy to talk about the victories, the Six Nations wins, the big matches we played in, etc., and the good times. It's, you know, nobody needs. It's almost like those are in the forefront, and you remember those, and you know, you don't need anybody to help you through those times. But for me, it's kind of, I remember again a similar disappointment was that 2017 game against Scotland, where the first time we lost to Scotland under Gatz's reign, and it was kind of like, that's probably for me, like that's the first time I probably thought, and I you know me relatively well, Kath. I'm not that bothered about what people think or say or whatever about me, but probably that was the one moment in my career I remember I was in the kitchen with Alex, and I just said to her, I said, like, what am I putting myself through this for? Why am I like putting everything on the line, working my absolute socks off to get this as a reward? And Kath, you know what it's, you've been there yourself in terms of how tough it is and the criticism, etc. But that was the first time for me it felt really personal. So like I don't care if you think I'm a good rugby player or somebody, you know, people in Wales or the UK or the world think that you know, Johnny Sexton's better than me or Owen Farrell's better than me or whatever. That's opinion, and I'm fine living with that. But for me, that was probably the first time I felt like it was real personal, being in that number 10 shirt for Wales, and that's when I really felt that was like, you're in a shirt there which is different to being a number 12 for Wales or a number 6 for Wales type of thing. So for me, that was a time where I just think I could have easily packed in there, and if someone had offered me a way out, then I may well have taken it. But I think then conversely is to come back so, you know, strongly from that, and the ups and downs in the book of, you know, it's almost like I did the audiobook a few weeks ago, and I realized when you speak and you read it, like probably like what you're listening to it, you realize how many ups and downs there was in the career. You know, if someone says to you, you've got someone who's played 112 times, 2 Lions tours, 6 Nations wins, World Cup semi-finals, etc., you sort of think, oh, well, life and your career just carries on going upwards. But for me, it was the realization of how many downs there were in that 15, 16-year career, and how well I've done to sort of keep coming back from it rather than giving up. You know what I mean? Yeah,
100%. I always find those downs, and then it's just how you respond, isn't it, to go back up again, which I think you were probably one of the best at. And I look at that now from when I was, you know, when I had my downs, probably how I reacted in probably the wrong way. But you only do that through experience, don't you? I think, and I was, I think I had my sort of downs, and I struggled to get back up then, which is why I think when I came back from Exeter, that was probably one of my best feelings about being in the Welsh shirt, is getting back in and able to do that. And like you did that many a time, which is all credit, really.
Yeah, I quite, to be honest, I quite like the downs as well, in a strange kind of way. I know we've talked about it, the disappointments and the frustration and things, but I quite like the downs. I quite like proving people wrong, and I quite like people sort of coming at me, you know, having a bit of confrontation with, whether it was with journalists, whether it was with supporters
or Scottish fans.
Yeah,
when we played Scotland, that used to wind me up. They used to always say, we'll turn up at Principality, we'll beat them. No, you've beaten us once in 20 years, mate. Like, come on. You used to always go on about that. So
for me, it was like, I quite liked the downs in terms of then the next week I always felt like I responded quite well to them. So it was, even though in the moment it was really tough to be in, I really quite enjoyed those moments where I came out the other end of it. And that's kind of like a bit of a theme of the book. It's almost like, you know, it's almost like a bit of a roller coaster ride, which is kind of what my career in that number 10 shirt has been.
Yeah, literally, mate. Some career, I'm not going to lie, it's pretty good, Ross, isn't it?
But it's a good point, because I think doing this process, and we've spoken about this, actually made Dan appreciate what he had achieved? Because I think there's a tendency, and not just with Dan, but among pro sports people in general, because you're always looking at what's over the next horizon. You never really stop and reflect in the moment and properly appreciate your victories. But as we know, if 10 people say something positive about you and one person says something negative, you tend to dwell and fixate on the negative. And I think I found that quite pleasing, really, because there were times when Dan and I would be talking, and it was almost like a veil was lifted and you realised at times, Dan, actually, that was pretty good. I did all right there. I've achieved quite a lot. Whereas it's almost human nature, isn't it, to think about the failings rather than the triumphs.
Biggs, you mentioned obviously in the book that you said about how you struggle to feel a bit accepted. Is that as from Gatland, or was that within the squad or Wales in general?
I think probably in a bit of a mixture of everything, really, Kath. I think we said at the very start of the book, really, that I didn't fit the mould really to be a Welsh 10 in a way type of thing, in terms of what people wanted from me, what had come before me in terms of the legends that had played beforehand. But so for me, it was kind of like I always felt like I had to prove myself over and over again. And I think for me that kind of rubbed off a little bit with Gats, and you know what Gats is like. He's never one really to sort of put an arm around you and things, especially not with me anyway. Our relationship was very professional. It was very successful and things, but very professional. And I felt like for me, it was always like I had to make sure that I was maybe 10% better than anybody else to get, whether it be credit or praise or accepted a little bit. You know what I mean? I felt like I had to be a little bit better than anybody else because of the people who played before me, because of the success and the success that people have had in that shirt beforehand. So for me, the biggest thing that made me accepted in the squad and with Gats and with the Welsh public and etc. was success. And I think that's the only way you truly, and that's what I felt anyway, the only way you were really accepted. And when I look back at the successful period we had, and even though I wasn't your typical Welsh try half, I felt like, well, there's not too many that would be more successful. So I think for me, that's when I looked at it and I thought, right, well, no matter what everybody else says, no matter what coaches, supporters, journalists, everybody says, when you look back at your record and you say, bloody hell, yeah, like Ross said, when I look back and I think, well, bloody hell, I did do all right there. And that made me feel accepted, part of everything, and have a bit of a swagger and a bit of an attitude. And sometimes, like, I know I'm not, you know better than anyone, Kath. I know I'm not the easiest person to be in a team with, or I know I'm not the easiest person to live with. But I'm also not saying that I'm perfect either. I know that I've got faults, and I know I'm not perfect in any stretch. But when you have a successful career and when a successful period like we did, it's almost like quite nice to be able to almost stick two fingers up at people as well. Do you know what I mean? That's what I kind of quite liked the having the attitude of as well. So yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on how difficult I was, Kath, to be honest, in terms of
what, under you?
In camp, on the pitch and things like that, yeah.
Gee, I was more pissed off that you took all my money in cards all week. This man, the amount of money he's taken off the boys over the years must be...
Is that all right? Hustler,
yeah. But no, like...
Didn't you ban someone from your cards? Didn't you ban someone? Was it Foxy?
Foxy in South Africa.
Speaking of him, mate, you got to give you dues. He's had some career, hasn't he? Like, you got any sort of fond memories, obviously, other than him stealing our money in South Africa? But just him as a player and a bloke.
I think Foxy, probably when you look at Foxy in that between 2013, 2017 in particular, Foxy is brilliant throughout his whole career, but he was the premier number 13 in world rugby, wasn't he? He was fit, he was strong, he was quick, he looked after himself incredibly well. He gave that left-footed option. Talked really well, and just a brilliant rugby player, and he deserves all the praise that he's going to get this week, and hopefully for a lot longer. But we were in South Africa, and it was 2014, Kath, wasn't it? And we were there. We were just sort of, I think it was the day before we played one of the tests, and we were just playing cards.
I think we were in Nailsprit.
Knelsbury it was, wasn't it? And we were there for hours playing, weren't we? Up and down, and then Foxy comes along for about 15 minutes, takes all the money and then leaves. And normally the rule is if you win, you've got to stick about for like half an hour. So from that, he was banned. I don't care what his status was in the game. He wasn't playing cards with us again. But no, just a brilliant player, brilliant bloke, really good teammate to have. And like I said, he deserves a huge amount of praise, which I'm sure he'll get.
You should have seen that coming. He grew up in a pub, didn't he? So by all accounts, he's the best at darts, the best at pool, the best at cards. A misspent youth in his parents'
Well, he hustled us. Matthew Rees. Yeah,
Smiler was fuming, wasn't he?
Smiler didn't speak to him genuinely for about a week after that.
Oh, yeah, he was a fair play. Great bloke. He's had a great career. I hope he does have a few beers tonight and just think, sometimes you can just look back now, can't he, on his career.
Oh, tremendous player.
Bigsby, obviously, Gats is you got that relationship with Gats where he loves you, he hates you, doesn't he, sort of thing, over your career. Obviously, not being picked for that 2013 Lions tour was a bit of a shock to everyone in Wales, isn't it, considering what we achieved. Was that probably the toughest moment of your career, like in terms of just trying to accept?
Yeah, it was tough. Like Ross said, I remember I was in London. I was meeting my agent in London, actually. And it was one of those moments where I felt a little bit, almost a little bit embarrassed meeting him for lunch and things, you know what I mean? In terms of, if there'd have been maybe 6 or, 4 or 5 of the boys that hadn't got in, and I was one of them, maybe I could have accepted it a little bit more, you know what I mean? Maybe thought, maybe quite wasn't my time or whatever. But like you said, for 14 out of the 15 not to get in, I suppose it's hard, no matter who the coach is, I suppose it's hard to take that, not personally. You know what I mean? I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how yourself, Ross, or any player would have not taken that. Anybody in life would have taken that not personally. So there was definitely. I definitely felt like that was probably. I don't know, and maybe unfair. Maybe people listening to this will think, okay, well, he wasn't quite at that level, and that's fine. Or maybe there was other reasons. But for me, it felt like it was another sort of, like we spoke about earlier, another moment where I felt like, again, I had to. Well, what more do I have to do to get a praise or a selection or something off Gats? And it was a really tough moment, because I suppose I didn't see it coming. I thought I'd done enough, you know what I mean? And sometimes when you're thinking, if it comes, it comes, and I'm not holding out. But I thought I'd probably done enough as well. So I probably had started booking, looking at flights for family and things for the and all those bits and pieces. But that's something that I spoke about, Ross, wasn't it? That was like, it was almost like the more embarrassed moment rather than disappointment and anger type of thing.
Yeah, and I found that really revealing, because our mantra throughout this whole process was, tell us what we don't know, tell us something we don't already know. And like Dan said earlier, the triumphs are imprinted on all of our brains, from the fans' perspective and from your players' perspective as well. So we kind of know what happened on the pitch, but we don't know what happened off the pitch. And when I asked Dan that question about, feelings following the 2013 Lions announcement, I expected, especially from what people have seen of his personality on the pitch, I expected to be like rage, anger, all directed at Warren Gatland. But Dan said his primary emotion was embarrassment. And that really struck a chord with me. I thought, actually, I'd never thought of it from that perspective. But, impossible to not take it personally, as Dan said. But if you're the one person who doesn't get picked out of the 15 that won in a record victory over, the biggest foe in Welsh rugby history, it's impossible not to take that personally. And I'd never considered that embarrassment would be the primary emotion, because suddenly you're wondering if people think less of you or if people agree with that decision. And I found stuff like that from almost a psychological perspective, what really kind of drew me into the story.
Yeah. You, obviously, doing the book with Biggs, did your opinion of Gats change at all? Obviously, the way Biggs sort of speaks about him in the book, or was it something you already?
Yeah, because obviously my relationship with Warren Gatland, as far as I've got one, is very different to you guys, because I'm a member of the press in that regard, and I think he always treated me with a bit of suspicion. Like I think we always got on sort of superficially, but I could tell from what people like you guys have said over the years that he is very difficult to read. I've had relationships with other national coaches where you can pick up the phone and have a chat or an off-the-record debrief and stuff. So I would say my kind of opinion of Gatland didn't change. If anything, it probably confirmed what I thought about him. But as Dan said, that's not necessarily a criticism. There's more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there? And sometimes it's a coach's prerogative, I think, to treat a player or manage a player how he thinks will get the best out of them. And I spoke to Jamie Roberts about this a lot. Jamie only kind of learned afterwards, after he retired, that the reason he never got any praise from Warren or Sean Edwards, for that matter, was because
or any player he played with as well.
Definitely not.
The reason that was, at least as far as he understands it, is because he was so self-assured and so confident, and rarely ever would his ego be dented, that if he was lavished with praise, it might actually lower his standards because he might get a bit complacent and a bit slacker. Whereas other players, as you guys well know, like I think Gavin Henson was a prime example, needed to have his ego massaged, needed to be told he was the best in the world. Filthy, another example.
Yeah.
So I don't know enough about the inner sanctum of the changing room to really comment on that, but it sounds as though, Gatland had different approaches with different players according to their level of confidence or insecurity or otherwise.
Yeah, he was very good at just getting into certain boys' heads when he bigs. Like he'd come one-on-one little chat. He'd come up to you and be like, "I can see 2 tries in you today," or something like that. I don't know if he spoke to you like that, Biggs, but
yeah, no, he was. And I think sometimes when sometimes you focus, like Ross said earlier, you can say, how many positive things did we say about Gats in the book, Ross? But naturally, someone's going to want to be more focused on the slightly more controversial, or so-called controversial,
of course, yeah.
thing. But for me, I remember Gats, in particular, Gats' first spell, Cuff, wasn't he? He was just, like you said, brilliant at just sort of little comments like that, and sometimes little snide comments which would sort of rile you up a little bit, but then you go out and you train the house down, or you prove the point on the pitch or whatever. And one thing he did, I remember, we just went in that 2015 World Cup game, where it was like the England game was billed as a big game, and I just remember for the whole of that summer, like subtle messages like writing, "We will beat England" on the whiteboard in the gym, or we should be confident, we shouldn't be scared of playing England, or I fancy us, pound for pound or player for player, we're better than them. And I think the way he managed that in particular and made us believe that we could win, I think that's Gats' biggest thing. Wales before Warren Gatland, I don't think there was many occasions or many matches where we, or certainly probably players, supporters, media, everyone went into matches thinking we could win. Whereas when Gats arrived and during Gats' spell, whoever we were playing, we believed we could win. Now, I'm not saying we did win, clearly, and we played well all the time, but the psyche changed when he came in, when Sean came in, when Rob was there, when that group of management. Every game we played, we believed we could win. And I think that is almost the biggest compliment that you could probably give Gats and that coaching group, was that he made us believe we could win, which is very different to what it was clearly before he came in.
Yeah, I think I'd have to say Sean Edwards is probably up there in terms of, he's one of my favourite / sort of best coaches I've ever been under, in just terms of how he can get the best out of you, but in a real weird sort of way, isn't it, Biggs? In terms of his reviews, and you obviously speak about it in his book, in your book, about how sometimes if you had less, that was worse, wasn't it? Sort of thing.
The wall of shame, wasn't it, Captain? The Monday morning.
Do you remember?
You and George. You and George would be the ones.
You'd be like, "Lad, we get a new fucking right winger. This lad."
I just remember we said the thing on the last couple of weeks on the book tour. But basically, if you remember if you just got OK on your name next to your number, you were over. Like, boys were basically buying champagne if you got OK from Sean Edwards.
If you got nothing, then you were worried.
Yeah, George had probably. To be fair to George probably had the toughest time with him, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he had tougher time out of us boys. I think one of the worst ones I've seen was probably Hibbard. I don't remember out his second.
Oh, Hibbs had a bad one as well, didn't he?
Out in Australia.
The penalty at the end of the game.
I don't know. I think he gave away the penalty 2 penalties in a row actually came off. Penalty. They worked their way up the field, and then they had to kick a goal in the 80th minute.
Yeah.
You know, we hadn't beaten Australia I reckon if we win that game, we probably win the series, don't we? But I can't remember what he writ on the next day, Sean, but it was like, never play for Wales again.
Yeah, if you do that again, you never play for Wales or something. Yeah, it was. I mean, all the boys took great delight in rinsing boys who had bad comments, especially if you had a good comment. And someone who you were close to didn't have a good comment, you were happy to get stuck into them. But a brutal Monday morning experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, it used to be bad because I used to put it on the big screen so everyone, you could see it, big bold writing.
Yeah, no hiding place.
That was usually where if you go, especially, I think it was a couple of nights out where we weren't supposed to go out and we did go out, Biggs, wasn't it? And a couple of pictures in the paper. Remember Ireland?
No, don't bring me involved in this. This is you. Don't bring me involved in this.
But yeah, that used to be name and shame, wasn't it? Which is always good. Right, I can't not obviously speak about the Lions. Biggs in a big year. You know what those Welsh boys are going through right now. We'll have a little chat about who do you think will be captain this year? Who's your pick? I know you probably spoke about it a lot, but
do you know what? There's something I haven't actually thought. I always think it's always it's clearly a big thing in the Lions year, and it's always like up for debate and people like that. But I think there's so much rugby to go on before. Like you look at like 2013 or 2017. Sorry, was it 2013 or 2017? Well, I can't remember which one. Where basically Rob Shaw was like basically nailed on to be captain, wasn't he? From
2013, he was
2013,
favourite, wasn't he? Yeah.
So like he was like basically nailed on to be captain, and if we're doing this back in 2013, everyone's probably saying your first answer is Rob Shaw. And then obviously the way the Six Nations goes after that 2013 game, and you miss out on the selection altogether. So it's a really tough one. I don't think there's any absolute standout characters. I think, someone like Caelan Doris is probably above everyone, especially with his relationship with Andy Farrell.
Jamie George, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Jamie's
well,
brilliant. Yeah, I know Jamie really well. Jamie's a brilliant bloke, and is a brilliant captain, brilliant leader. Will be a brilliant tourist. Was a brilliant tourist. So I think those things matter when you go on a Lions tour. But I do think at the minute probably Caelan Doris is favourite. But I think it matters very little because at this point, if you're asking me this after the Six Nations, I think you have a much better indication. I think the Six Nations will be a huge say on who plays, who tours, who captains the team or whatever. And I think it's really early this year. Even the autumn internationals, I think clearly they're important, but you almost want to be seeing players hit in form and confident in that Six Nations just a couple of months before you fly down to Australia. So if you're putting me on the spot and really wanting an answer, if I had to put, I don't know, 50 quid on somebody at the minute, it'd probably be Caelan Doris. But I think there's still a lot to happen before that plane to Australia takes off.
Did you guys see Chris Robshaw in SAS Who Dares Wins?
I watched the first one. He's left though, isn't he? Bad shoulder again.
Episode 1 and left.
I haven't seen that.
Would you guys fancy that?
I would.
Would you really?
Yeah, I haven't. I'd love to just see how much of a black hole I can go in. I thought I couldn't go any further than Qatar. Remember Qatar bits?
Yeah, you're all right. You're all right, Kath, because you're quite athletic. Whereas someone like me, I'd be struggling from day one or from minute one, I think. So you may be able to dig in a bit more than me, but I reckon I'd be struggling on something like that. Yeah.
Jamie apparently was sniffing around it.
No, he hasn't got the head for it, has he?
There's no way he'd have stuck it out. He'd have been struggling. But anything running wise, he'd have struggled.
Yeah, I literally, no joke, probably about an hour ago, listened to your book, Biggs, about Jamie Roberts doing those runways in Qatar. I've never seen anyone. He was running 20 meters. We were running 100 odd, and we were still getting back.
The drill is like 40 seconds on 20 seconds on, 20 seconds off, effectively.
Yeah,
and we're convinced Jamie was doing 35 on, 5 off. There's no doubt about it.
Was that after his couple of years in Paris where maybe a bit too much cheese and red wine?
He didn't have any rest, did he?
He was on the coffee and croissants every morning for breakfast, I think.
You remember we did the runways at the start of the session? He was like, right, I'm going to go flat out. We were like, you sure? He went for it. He did like a record, and then he didn't realise how much more we had left of the session, because I think he just thought that was it, wasn't it? Because you'd go into like power endurance, And then we were doing like 18, 10 on, 10 offs, wasn't it, in 50-degree heat? It was
what do we call it? We called it DEFCON Day, didn't we? DEFCON Day or DEFCON session.
I want to see you. I want to see you in it next year, then, Cathy.
In that,
get on it, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Because the year Jamie nearly went in it, I think he did anyway. Matt Hancock was there, and I was like, how nice would it be to, the boxing
someone
challenge.
Just whack him in the face.
Jamie just lamp him in the face.
I reckon Matt Hancock would have been fitter than Jamie as well.
That was the really disappointing thing. Matt Hancock, the reason he was in there was so that we could all watch him squirm, and he was actually all right. Like he actually dug in. For someone who looks as weedy as he does and incapable of anything physical, he was actually quite stoic, which disappointed me immensely.
Literally the most unliked man in the UK, isn't he? Pretty much.
Certainly then he was, yeah.
Literally. Wales boys, who do you think, because obviously we spoke about it then in terms of, it's all about Six Nations, isn't it? Probably Wales v Ireland, that'd be a big game for the Wales boys. All it takes is that one game, doesn't it? To sort of think, Farrell's, what Andy Farrell's like, but he's obviously got something about him, because I think he will gravitate to a few of the Welsh boys just because what they're like in camp and what they are mentally. Do you reckon he will?
Yeah, I think clearly at the minute it's it's not easy. If you're selecting a Lions team, you're not probably looking at too many of the Welsh lads, aren't you? I think one thing I think is important. I think even in a team that's struggled a little bit over the last 12 months, I think Thomas Williams has been a brilliant standout. I do think his form for Gloucester. I know that they're experimenting with a new style of play and they haven't quite got the results, but the way that he's playing, if you put a really dominant pack in front of him with the best of the best around him, I think he's got the ability to light the game up and especially especially when you play in Australia, where perhaps it's not going to be. If you play in South Africa, the game may be slightly more structured and not as many opportunities to have those moments of brilliance. So I think Thomas Williams will be there or thereabouts without a doubt.
Captain?
I think Jack Morgan. Captain, I'd say the social side of the Lions would be absolutely through the roof if he was captain. I will say that.
Imagine the abuse in those socials. Jeez.
Well, I was going to say he'd be good value. Living with the Lions would be good value if you had some cameras on that. But
you're not thinking of following in the footsteps of Courtney Laws and Faz, are you, Biggs? Make yourself available. Retire from Test rugby, but
I'm definitely not doing that. No, 100%. I'm very, very.
I just think we need another chapter for the paperback edition. So,
is your backup?
There'll be plenty of chapters from the Toulon couple of years, mate. Don't worry, we'll make sure we squeeze something.
Sounds
in.
like there's a whole new book to come out of that.
The Toulon experience. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think Thomas Williams will be there or thereabouts. I think Jack Morgan will be there or thereabouts as well. I think Wales have missed him, and I also think Wales have missed. There's a lot of doom and gloom about Welsh rugby and the national team, clearly, because they haven't won any games for 12 months or whatever. But I think the autumn, I think they'll surprise a few people. I think having Thomas, Gareth Anscombe back, Jack Morgan, Adam Beard, all of a sudden that's a bit of the spine of your team, which has got possibly Toby Faletau if he gets
they've missed that bad, haven't they?
Yeah, they just missed a bit of experience, and you, Kath, you know what it's like when I came into the team and when you came into the team, it was a team full of experience, know-how, streetwise winning, used to winning games, and it makes a difference, doesn't it? If you've got a young group coming in, not used to winning at club level, to then chucking you all in together, minus Jack Morgan, minus Gareth Anscombe, minus Thomas Williams, Adam, these guys. So I do think Will Rowlands as well, obviously, has missed the summer tour as well. So I think you get those boys back in. I think Will Rowlands is another great shout as well for Lions place as well. I think he's been brilliant over the last 12 months. Probably Wales' best player, isn't he, in terms of behind Aaron Wainwright as well. Who, again, I think he's going to have a brilliant chance with the way that the game is played. I think as well, it makes a big difference who you're playing.
Yeah.
I think you play in Australia where, if you play in South Africa, you maybe have to select slightly different players. But, you look at someone like an Aaron Wainwright or someone like that who's going to absolutely sort of love those free-flowing, bit more maybe shape to the game and a bit more sort of open space for him to play compared to when you play against maybe the Springboks or someone like that. I think that makes a difference. So I'm actually quite confident for Wales this autumn. I think maybe South Africa, got to call it as it is. South Africa are at a very, very different stage to in their development or their process to Wales. But I think against Australia and Fiji, I fancy Wales to get a couple of results this autumn. Yeah.
You think? How do you think Gats? Do you reckon he's under the pump a little bit if they don't quite get the results early? You know, Fiji's a big game, isn't it, Biggs? You know, and they win that, then momentum is massive. In the autumn, we've never really done that well, have we? You know, in terms of getting results, that's a pretty big start.
Yeah, massive, and yeah, I think if. Probably Gats has got a little bit more grace than any other candidate would have, hasn't he? Because of his legacy, because of what he's achieved in his previous tenure. But yeah, I think if it was anyone else in that position and having lost every game in the last calendar year, then they would be under an immense amount of scrutiny. So yeah, I think results over Fiji and Australia are kind of critical, really. There's a different regime now at the WRU other than the one that reappointed him. So, yeah, I'm sure he's under the kind of scrutiny that any head coach should be if results aren't going your way. But, as Dan says, there's a lot of players to come back into that side. The Australia tour gave him a chance to run the rule over some of the more fringe players, and some Archie Griffin, no one really knew much about him. I remember doing a game with Francois Lowe when he'd first been added to the Wales squad, and Francois was still involved in Bath, and he said he'd been around, but no one hadn't stuck his head above the parapet as even a first choice club player, let alone a test player. But he looked the part, didn't he, on that Australia tour? So kind of a diamond in the rough. I guess a bit like Thomas Francis. When he was first brought into the squad, he been playing lower league rugby and wasn't particularly in international shape initially. But
Tubby Prop, as Biggs called him in his book. You won't be happy with that, will he?
I think goes well, Kath. Just to go answer your question, I think like Gats has been around the game long enough, isn't he? It doesn't matter. He doesn't need me, you, Ross, or anybody to tell him that. If Wales don't pick up results, whatever your name is, whatever your position is, you're going to be under a little bit of pressure, and that's not sticking the knife in or anything. This is coming from players who've been involved with Wales, even when people think we never or we hardly lost. We had some really tough moments. But ultimately, yeah, clearly, if you don't pick up results, then questions are going to be asked. That's the way professional sport works. But I do think it's like you said, Fiji's a huge game first up, and I think this young group of players welcoming back a core of experienced pros. I think you win that first game, and I think you'll see a different team in that game against Australia, and then you've almost got a bit of a free hit against the Springboks in the last week, haven't you? So I think clearly the first week is a big one, but if you get over the line in that one, I think then all of a sudden the shackles are off a little bit. And conversely, if you don't get over the line in that one, then clearly the pressure builds and builds and builds. But Gats has been around the game, certainly longer than any of us, and he'll know what it takes, and he'll know that he'll be under pressure if you don't get results. Exactly.
And I think the squad is announced next Monday, so I'm expecting quite a mixed team. I do expect quite a few lads from the English League to get picked. I don't know about you, Biggs. You obviously watch a lot of the Prem as well, don't you? Do you think there's any sort of outside shots for certain boys? Like Max Llewellyn, he's going quite well at Gloucester. Jared Evans as well. Apparently he can get picked.
I think the 10. I think the 10 shirt in particular is like a bit of a. There's lots of players playing, but probably not that many with experience, is there? In terms of apart from Gareth, who I think will be in the squad, whether they'll use him as a bit of a whether it's a starting role or whether it's a almost like a senior player role in terms of helping a Jared, a Callum Sheedy, a Sam Costello, a Johan Lloyd, whatever it is, but. I think Jared's been playing a little bit, obviously with Marcus Smith playing a bit of full back as well. I think he's got a decent shout. I think I've liked Max at Gloucester. I think his versatility with playing centre and wing will make him a good option as well. So I think those boys have got a chance. The Exeter lads, you'd imagine, will be there or thereabouts, even though they haven't had a great start to the season. But no. I think as well. I think. The big thing as well, there's no games during the autumn in the Prem, is there? So, clearly that, if they got to go back, they haven't got to play any rugby. Do you know what I mean?
It's a big difference. I don't think it's changed a lot, isn't it, from when you were at Northampton,
Yeah, so I think that'll obviously help their cause in terms of, 4 places in the autumn and 6 Nations, where the Prem will just stop for the autumn and 6 Nations period. But, Yeah, like I said, I've always been a believer and an advocate of if you've got players playing for quality teams, or if you've got players playing well, just you pick them. You know, whether they're playing in France, England, Ireland, Wales. You know, for me, it doesn't really matter. I think you just pick who's playing well and you just get on with it. If it means they miss a session or two, then that's what it is. But I think there'll be a heavy contingent from the Prem, no doubt.
Yeah, I always hope so. The Welsh boys are going well in the Prem, so hopefully a few get picked. Looking ahead, obviously this weekend we got Friday night, we got Scarlets v Bulls, Ulster v the Ospreys. Saturday we got Edinburgh v Cardiff and Dragons v Benetton. You can find all those odds for the weekend's rugby at Dragon Bet. So there's some good games there. Hopefully, it's the last sort of audition, isn't it, for the Welsh boys to put their hand up for the autumn.
I tell you, I've put his hand up last 2 weeks. Tame Basham, literally come back firing on all cylinders on both sides of the ball. Like 2 tries on the weekend against the Lions, and the previous week against the Sharks, it was like something like 20 tackles, topped the dominant tackle charts for the league that weekend. So for a bloke who isn't, he's not massive, is he? But geez, he punches his weight, and he's powerful, versatile as well. Like he's played 7 and 8 so far this season. So I think he'll be straight back in.
I think if Toby's not fit, I think he'd be thereabouts, wouldn't he?
I felt for him with the last couple of weeks because, like you said, Ross, he's been brilliant and probably hasn't got, from a results point of view, probably just certainly the one against the Sharks. Probably the Dragons are the only team that could have lost that game, sort of in terms of where their run is and where their luck is a little bit at the minute. But he's been excellent, and he adds a little bit of something different, doesn't he? A bit of a ball carrier, which Wales probably. If Toby isn't playing, you probably miss a little bit, don't we?
Yeah, they rely on Wainwright a lot, don't they?
He had that rare thing against the Sharks, a player of the match award on the losing side. It's the sort of thing that makes the sponsors really unhappy because there's just got like a really glum figure holding the player of the match award in front of the sponsors' boards, just looking really sad and depressed.
Just like Big said, they're the only team that could lose that. They win the week before, don't they, against the Dragons and against Ospreys, and then they go. And
2 weeks running now, they've done the same. They've kind of surrendered a winning position against South African opposition, but they're getting there. I think they're not getting pumped anymore, are they?
No,
they're looking better. It's confidence, isn't it, to get over the line?
Of course it is. Right, we're near the end of the pod, Biggs, and we did this last week. We did we did a Snog, Marry, Avoid, but I did Gats, Jenks and Howlers. But I won't ask you that because...
I'm not quite sure where I could go with that stuff, to be honest with you.
Well, Jadzi went straight for Gats because he's got the cash. So.
I know, no doubt.
But you've got enough cash. Did, So we've done start, bench, drop. We'll do both of you. We've done Sexton, Russell and Owen Farrell.
Oh, Jesus, whatever I say is going to get a headline. I would start Johnny, bench Owen, and I think because of the quality of the other two, Finn would probably just miss out. Yeah.
Ross?
I mean, who am I to disagree with one of the greatest tens of all time?
Yeah, just agree with that, is it?
No, I'll put Finn on the bench just to be different. And I suppose Johnny and Faz, similar type players, aren't they? So I suppose if you're a score down with 10 to go, and I know Finn could lose you a game as easily as he could win for you, but I'll stick the Maverick on the bench and drop Farrell. Oh my God, that's controversial.
Cup, what are you going for? This will be interesting. Having played with both of them.
Who would I go for? Faz is.
Is this when they were all in their prime?
Yeah, of course.
Not right now.
Who's your sort of favourite player? I'd probably start Russell, and then I'd have probably Owen Farrell on the bench and drop Sexton. That's only because he didn't want to come on my pod, Sexton, so he can suck it.
3 different answers.
There we go. One more question. Well, I got 2 more actually. Biggsy, your favourite Lions or Wales memory? Your whole career?
One that I've been involved in, Kath, or one that I've watched from the telly, or
that you've been involved. Obviously you've been in 2 Lions. You've done 2 Lions tours. Yeah. New Zealand and South Africa and everything you've won. What is the one thing that really sticks out?
Probably favourite.
Could be a night out.
Favorite on, I was going to say I'll go for favorite on field was being named, obviously, because I had a big bucket list in terms of being test centurion, playing abroad, being the Lions, becoming a Test Lion. So I think for me, when my name was read out as for that first test in South Africa, even though the tour was really really hard work being in the middle of COVID. But probably that feeling when I got back to my room after the team was named and you realise that you've become a Test Lion, that was pretty special. I remember phoning my wife straight away, and it was just after my mum passed away as well. So that was quite a strong memory for me in that. So that would definitely be sort of on the field. And then probably off the field in 2017, George Cruz had to pick up a 1,500 quid for beers and for food when we went out in Wellington. So that for me would be the best Lions moment off the field.
And that was the week he got dropped as well from the Test side.
Yeah, he just got dropped from the Test team. Marler offered to split the bill with him when it got down to the final two, but he backed himself to come out on top and got stung with 1,500 quid for in an Italian restaurant for pizza and pasta and beers. Oh
yeah, some good. Those Lions trips. The off field is good. Obviously, you probably experienced more in the 2017 than the Lions run, but stories for days, probably for another time. But lads, just want to say thanks for coming on, Biggs. I know you're busy. You were training with Toulon, and fair play. I appreciate that. And Ross, thanks for your time, mate. And
my pleasure.
Everyone, the book there, and you can get it obviously online as well. Like I'm hearing it in my car. My kids are like, "Why is Dan Biggar keep speaking all the time?" So yeah, mate, appreciate your time, and hope it all goes well. Guys. Cheers, boys.
Good man. Cheers, guys.
Ta-ra, boys.
Thanks for tuning in to Sport in Wales podcast. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on all socials for all things Sport in Wales.
Sport in Wales podcast.
Supported by Dragon Bet.
Your go-to for Welsh sports news and views.